I think a big thing about like interventions today is that historically, and what you saw on TV was this like surprise factor. Like, let's trick your loved one into coming to a place where they're not going to be comfortable, where they're going to have their guard up, and where you're going to sit down and read them some letters. That's not how like 85% of them are done today. There are still some people who do it that way, but it's not the majority of it now.
And there are some circumstances where maybe that's your only option.
It's your only option.
Right? Good afternoon. My name is Graham Durgee, and I'm the founder and CEO of New Waters Recovery in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to our weekly podcast, Finding New Waters. I'm joined today by our Director of Admissions and Outreach, B. Reeves, and Issac Waters, who's the founder of Recovery Frameworks. Recovery Frameworks offers non-clinical support services to supplement the teams of individuals with substance use disorder and eating disorders. Issac Waters is a certified peer specialist, a life coach, and certified Arise Interventionist. He works extensively with individuals and families who are struggling with navigating early recovery from addictions, mental health barriers, and eating disorders. In the past, he has dealt with his own struggles with substance use disorders, mental health challenges, and family systems. In long-term recovery, Issac now dedicates his life to working with individuals in recovery. It is his passion to help families heal, to watch individuals launch into a new phase of life, and to help those he works with find purpose. Our goal in creating Finding New Waters is to provide a resource for families to help navigate the complexities of supporting a loved one while struggling with substance use or mental health issues. When we find ourselves in crisis due to one of these issues, most people have no idea where to turn. We hope to shed some light onto what is often the darkest hour for many families. Issac, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And this has been kind of long overdue, and happy to finally have you up here. And so Issac is actually joining us today from Atlanta, flew up last night. So we're very grateful for him, traveling all this way in person. And I was doing a little bit of research leading up to this. And, one of the things that kind of I came across early on was that you were a guy that got sober very young, right? How
Yes.
old were you when you got sober?
I was 19 when I got sober.
Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, teenager.
And, for me, I was 26 when I finally ended up getting sober, but I definitely could have gotten sober a lot younger. For me, drinking was really, it was never a social thing. It was always an issue. I was drinking tequila by myself at 14 years old in my bedroom while I was supposed to be doing homework, which is not a normal, behavior pattern by any means. And, what was interesting was that my family was very much in the dark. And, I grew up in one of those families where, you don't talk about those uncomfortable things, right? You kind of you sweep everything under the rug. And I always find it so interesting when people get sober that young and are able to sustain long-term sobriety for that long and that period of time. And so tell us a little bit about what that was like and kind of some of your experiences getting sober that young.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was, I come from a family that like alcoholism has ran rampant through. Like I'm, I think 5th generation at this point. And so it was no surprise. Like my mom, I can remember when I was 12 years old being like, hey, you might have a problem with this one day. And like, that was the last time we talked about it.
Is your family in recovery?
So my father is.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So I think that I briefly mentioned it. We were talking about another treatment center before the podcast. And I was like, yeah, my dad went there a few times.
Right.
And so that was like my childhood, and I grew up that way. And it was kind of, I can remember like DARE coming to schools and stuff like that. And I was always the first one to sign my name because I like knew like what drugs and alcohol did to people. And like my dad was very successful. Like it was not like one of those stories. And so I had, some of that stigma was already broken down in me. I knew it could happen to anybody. And I always told myself it wasn't going to happen to me. And I was a late bloomer in my friend group, and like it was the first thing. I was the first one to fall down too. Yep. So I think that like from the moment I started using like drugs and alcohol, I knew that it was going to be a problem. Like there was no doubt. I knew that I liked it more than my friends, and it took me quickly. Like I think that I took my first drink at 16 and I was in a treatment center at 17. So like very fast, very fast.
Yeah. And mom and dad probably picked up on it very fast.
My
too, right?
dad was still drinking.
Oh,
so
he was still drinking?
yeah, he was my little hideout. So I would go out there when I get in trouble with mom, and like dad like was none the wiser onto what was going on. And I got in a lot of trouble very quickly as well. And so I think that like when that like charade fell down, my parents were very attentive. And I went through this period where I would go to treatment and my dad would be drinking. I'd come back from treatment and he would go to treatment. So we did this thing for like 3 years where like we'd each, when the other one was in treatment, we would relapse, like whoever was at home. And then finally, my dad and I went to treatment at the same time. We went to the same treatment facility.
No way.
Yeah, same treatment facility. I got there like 3 months later than he did. And when I walked in the door, they were like, "Oh, you're Dave's son. We've been expecting you." And I was like, "You guys are awful." My dad and my dad's got like 3 more months than I do sober, and we've both been able to maintain it.
That's
at this
crazy.
point. Yeah.
And mom had to deal with all that.
Mom got the short end of the stick for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
She's
She's a saint. Yes,
Yeah.
a saint. Lovely woman. Lovely woman.
So how many times were you in treatment?
I went to treatment. If you count like PHP and IOPs after residential, I went to 6 different facilities.
Gotcha. But that was a lot of it was kind of a continuation, a step down from residential.
Always a step down.
Yeah.
And so each time I went to treatment, I would come back and do an IOP when I got out.
Got it. So what do you think was one of the kind of key factors in you being able to figure this out at such a young age?
Yeah, so I went to Talbot Recovery when I was 19, and at the time they had a young adult program. And so I had been thrown into like teen treatment centers where nobody wanted to be there. And then I had been thrown into the like generic, insurance mill treatment facility down in Florida. And, just across, like I'm sitting next to a 75-year-old woman that's there for opiates, and like I have nothing to identify with her. Right. And then when I sat in that room and there was 45 guys between 18 and 25, like that were talking about recovery and like trying to do things and talking about going to college or talking about being in college and how they're going to navigate this now. I think that it was the first time that I like had tried this recovery way of life and did not feel hopeless. So like there was something to achieve just beyond getting sober, that like my life had purpose again.
Wow. That's awesome.
How did you manage to not only stay sober, but have fun going to the College of Charleston?
Yeah. So
sober.
I waited 2 years into my recovery to go to college. So like I really wanted to be prepared for that like scene, because College of Charleston's a big party scene. Like everything that I ever knew about college, it was just like one big party. And beyond the academics, like I was kind of nervous about navigating that. And I had this core group of friends that were all sober and all young and all doing things. Like they all had this thing that they were passionate about. They had all gone to college, or they were coming back, and they were in med school, or they were in PT school. And so this group, there was like 7 or 8 of us that we just like hung out all the time. Like when someone was out of school or someone was off work, we lived in the house that everybody came by to like get together on a Friday night. And sometimes we would do a meeting, sometimes we would do a poker game, sometimes we would go out to eat, like whatever it was. I had, I believe that people sober up, together, but they stay sober in packs. Like people find their core group and they stick together. Last year I was in 5 weddings of those guys.
Wow.
And so like everyone has continued to stay sober. And I think that it's like a testament to like what we did very early on.
That's amazing. Yeah, and it's incredible too, because unfortunately, most colleges are not very open to having a lot of these supportive services on their campus, right? And it's like they don't want to recognize the fact that they've got a substance use problem or a mental health problem on their campus, and they would rather just kick the kid out, or just kind of not deal with the issue, rather than somehow supporting or creating some resources on campus that can support their students that are in sobriety, right? So I think College of Charleston, going back to that, is a really interesting one, because they're one of these programs that have been really open to it and have done an incredible job of creating a collegiate program for recovery. And you were one of the founders of their collegiate program. So can you kind of talk about that process and getting that launched and what that was like?
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
So that we started that initiative in 2015, and it was several of my friends, Steve Pulley, who is a great guy who had gone through the collegiate recovery program at Georgia Southern, which was one of the first. They got that grant from Texas Tech and have been up and running for a long time. That he was coming back to MUSC for PT school. That was one of the guys that I was just mentioning. And so he came down, and another friend of mine, Sam Spafford, had gone to Augsburg College, which was the second collegiate recovery program. He had just moved to Charleston. My friend John Nix was starting at CFC. He had done a semester, and I had been applying for 2 years to get into the College of Charleston and kept getting denied. And so we had started
But you were
going.
determined.
Yeah, I was resilient, I think is,
Yes, that's a
and
good
so
word.
that's what I say. We had started going to them and saying like, hey, we'd like to start this, initiative on campus. Like we only had one actual student and just like 3 random guys were knocking on doors saying like, we'd like to help you guys start this. And we kept hearing that same thing. Like if we start a program like this, it's admitting that we have a drug problem on campus. And it's like, it's not admitting you have a drug problem. It is admitting that there are students in recovery on your campus, like, which is
Totally.
two very different things. And finally, I'm sitting in an office one day. We had like somehow finagled this meeting with the dean of students who, the last time I was sitting in a dean's office, like I was being asked to leave my high school, and so everyone had gone around and we had like a federal judge in the room. We had like 3 tenured professors. Everyone's giving these like long, like, explanations of who they are and why they're here. And I was like, my name's Issac Waters. Like I've applied to your school 7 times and been denied. Like I want to help you guys. And I got a call like, I think a week later that I had been accepted.
Wow.
And so we got started. We applied for a grant and received it. And me and John Nix met with, Dr. Jerry Cabot at the time was the dean of students. We met with her once a week and just like started resource mapping and seeing like who the players were, who could support this, what could we do. And finally the school was like, we can't give you guys any money. Like we can't do it. And we were all like, we want you to hire a director. We want you to hire a director. We want our own physical space. Like we had a ton of big asks for them. And they were like, well, if you go raise, $500,000, we'll start this thing for you. And we were all like hopeless, like, little kids. And the first person that we talked to donated $118,000 on the spot.
Wow. That's incredible.
And so after that, it just like snowballed. She held a fundraiser at our house. We got, over $300,000 donated in like 2 months. And then we started the director search. And I think that you guys both know Wood Marchand at this point. He's the director there. He has been since 2016. And, it started with 2 students. And at this point, it's graduated like 35. And there's 20 active students in the program today.
Wow,
So
that's awesome.
yeah, very cool.
Incredible.
Very cool.
Yeah, and I actually went there a few months back, and I visited with Wood Marchand, and he is, still just, he's in there every day with these guys, and they're grinding, and if they have this little office space with tons of snacks and food, and all the guys come in and just hang out in between class and do homework, and it's just a real community within this community,
Yeah.
And it's just like, I just don't understand why we can't wrap our head around why we need these resources in these colleges, right? I mean, listen, we're dealing with one of the biggest epidemics that we've ever seen, and now coming off of the pandemic. I mean, it's, people can't get into doctors, they can't get into providers, we're going downhill fast, and we just need to wake up,
Well, I love the idea of the collegiate recovery. Instead of it having to admit, or air quotes, having to admit we have a problem here, it's more like, how about we have a solution here, That's so cool. And it's interesting the schools who have gotten it, Texas Tech and Augsburg didn't know about that, but then Charlotte,
Alabama,
from UNC,
Alabama.
Well, you guys here in North Carolina, actually, the state requires it. So if you're a state-run university here in North Carolina, you have to have a
Is that
collegiate
new?
recovery. That's 2015.
Wow.
Yeah. So
cool.
you guys have done
Didn't
a
know
very
that.
cool job here.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. What do you tell? I mean, what's the demographic of people you work with typically in recovery frameworks?
Yeah. At Recovery Frameworks, we see this like bizarre end of the spectrum because I think obviously like just due to my history, like we do a ton of college age individuals. So we see this interesting like kind of spread. It's 13 to 20, and then it is 55 to 70. And so we are getting individuals that this might be their first like soiree into like recovery initiatives or treatment or complex kind of issues. And then we see individuals who are kind of in their retired life and like have, started some habits that aren't necessarily supportive to their long-term health.
Right. Basically, two parts of two demographics that don't work.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that about right? Yeah.
Life transitions, I think.
life transitions.
Yeah, life transitions.
And let's even, back up a little bit more on that and say, so you do sober companion jobs. You do, you work with clients that are struggling with eating disorders, mental health, case management, and interventions. So can you just tell us a little bit about, like, for instance, so the audience knows, what is a sober transport or a companion job?
Yeah, definitely. I can give the overview. Like, I think when we started, I really thought that we were going to be serving just this like 18 to 22, because that's where I was when I got sober. So it was just going to be, kids kind of entering college or might have failed out of college, and we were going to start on a coaching side. And our coaches meet with the people that we serve anywhere from like 5 to 20 hours a week. And that's, kind of across the spectrum. So any of our sober coaches, our eating disorder coaches, or our mental health coaches, what we do is we've got a 12-week curriculum that we're getting them started with. And that's really, we have a very extensive matchmaking process. So anyone who's onboarding with us as a client goes through a little mock mini assessment, and we're figuring out different things like hobbies, skills, interests, strengths. We're looking at their past attempts at recovery, like what they're doing today. What does their lifestyle look like? They're getting a lifestyle assessment in that as well. And then we're matching them up with the coach that's going to be the best fit for them. And so you're getting someone who is tailor-made to you, that has the same hobbies, has the same interests, has the same like path to recovery that you're striving for. So if you want to do 12-step, you're getting matched up with someone who does 12-step. If you want to do, faith-based recovery, you're getting matched with a faith-based recovery coach. And
you've got coaches all over the country.
All over the country, yeah. So our biggest chapters are in Atlanta, Raleigh, Charleston, Nashville, New York City, Miami, and LA. Okay. That's where we have the widest roster of coaches. And so all of our that kind of bleeds into our companion side as well. Companions and coaches have the exact same job. The only difference is time. So companions live with their clients. So that's 24/7. I'll say on average, our coaching clients, those people meeting part-time, stay with us for about 13 months. So we get them for a very long period of time.
That's huge.
Yeah. A really unique way to do that. And our companion, our live-in on average, I think is 75 days. So someone who's leaving treatment, leaving a detox facility that might not have the capabilities to go to a long-term treatment center like that, they're going to, use a companion to kind of come into the house, set them up, make sure that they're making it to all their appointments, if they have some complex kind of psychiatric or psychological needs, that they are bringing that into the house as well. And we can facilitate all that through our case management side.
And so who's a good candidate for the companion job?
Yeah, I think it's across the spectrum. What we talk about sometimes is the younger side, like someone who is in college that might have had, taken the summer off to go get well, and they've gone to treatment over the summer, or they might have had a medical withdrawal in the past semester, and they're determined, just like I was, to return to the College of Charleston or to go to the College of Charleston. They're determined to go back to that university, even though their parents are like, whoa, you kind of hit a lot of roadblocks when you were going to school there. Like, why don't we think about somewhere new? And talking to a young person like that, like, my big thing is like, let's use their strengths. They want to go back to college. Like, let's just make sure that they have the support structure around them to do so. And so that's a great candidate. Another great candidate is that kind of executive. So someone who necessarily does need this accountability. Someone who might be traveling a lot for work, or someone who kind of might not have accountability in the household. Someone who does need that kind of supportive structure, that coach to sit with them and say, like, we can get through today. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're building your schedule. This is what we're going to do tonight to make sure that we're following through on this recovery side of things. And I'm going to make sure that you're safe in your own house.
Right. Yeah.
What about for people who are, say, I've got a wedding this weekend. I've been out of treatment for, 2 weeks. I'm doing all right, but I'm going to this wedding. My best friend from college is getting married.
Yeah.
Do you do a companion just for the weekend, or does it need to be okay?
Yeah, 100%. So we do short-term stays and long-term stays. Okay. So most of the time it's just like that for the short-term side of things. Like, I've got a family vacation, or I've got, this thing that I can't miss. I'm a little nervous about it. A big one for us is actually Christmas Day, is people who are like going around their family for the first time after treatment, and they're a little bit nervous about it, and they just want that backup and support.
Yeah.
100%. And how do you find the people who are the companions, who are the coaches, especially in cities where you're not necessarily like in that area or that familiar with it?
Recruitment's a huge part of what I do. And finding those profiles is something that is pretty unique, because you think about like someone who's essentially going to be living with someone, like they got to be likable. They've got to be really good at their job, because this is important, a line of work, and they've got to have like intuition and determination. And so a lot of those things are things that I can't train. And so I travel all the time. I meet people wherever I can. I meet people in recovery initiatives. I go to meetings all over, different types of meetings, styles of meetings. I get introduced by other people that are interested in this line of work. We've got, a 5-step interview process with references, and then personality tests and assessments that we do with them. And so it just gets further and further along. And I find that weeds out the people who probably won't be a good fit for something like this, because if you can't make it through this 5-stage interview process, you're probably not going to make it through 90 days living with someone else.
100%.
And so I think that's a big thing. Another thing on the companionship line that we do really well is that we check in on them. I think that a lot of agencies are like, here's your job, here's your location, meet them there. I call them 3 times a day. I'm like, what are you doing? How are you doing? Like, what's going on? So they're never on an island out there. It's a big thing. They're always supported from the home office.
What are like a couple things they absolutely have to have? I mean, do they have to be sober? I mean,
Long-term recovery is number one. So we do a lot of work on the mental health side as well. And so anytime we are working with a complex mental health case, they have to have some type of clinical licensure, whether that's KDAC, whether that's MSW, whether that's, LPC, LPCA. So they have to have that side of it for the mental health. For the like substance use, long-term recovery. So have to have more than 5 years to work as a sober coach with us, which is a good thing for us because I think that 5-year mark is pretty, you just look at statistics at long-term recovery and like after 5 years, your odds of like lifelong recovery go up by 85%. Right. So
exponentially.
Exponentially.
Yeah. I mean, man, the companion job is a wild one. Yeah, it really is.
It is.
Going and living with folks for a month, 2 months at a time.
9 months. Yeah.
9 months.
Yeah, 9
I mean,
months.
You've done a 9-month job.
We've had them, and it's
have you
something,
personally?
No,
what's the longest you've done?
No. Longest one that I've done is 3 months. 3 months, and that's with leave. All of our contracts, we like write into it that like our companions work 3 weeks on, 4 days off. So
got it.
And we like ship them all over the country wherever they want to go. Like, what resort do you want to be at for 4 days? Like,
right.
That's come amazing. Back. Yeah, go check in on yourself. Yeah,
love it. So what about, so you are an Arise interventionist as well, right? So what would you say? Would you say that you're doing, your company and business now is comprised, you're doing more interventions, more companion jobs, or?
I would say that mostly companion jobs, and then coaching, and then interventions. Interventions really, our entire office got trained in that so that we could kind of, I guess, more so use that out of need. And it's a great way for us to cooperate and collaborate with treatment centers too. Yep. So I think that was really the purpose of that was so that we could kind of be more of a tool in the landscape of these non-clinical services.
Yeah.
What would you say? We here at New Waters, and then in our personal lives, we all talk to people who the families are calling me as an employee here, and me as somebody in recovery, and it's true for everybody here. And then they're just not willing to really go that next step and go the intervention route. They think they can just sort of cobble together something. And what would you say to families who are sort of like, they know about them and they probably from what they've seen on TV.
Oh,
and exactly. Yeah, so what do you say to them about the value add?
Yeah. Don't trust what you see on TV. I think that's what we know these days. Right. So I think a big thing about like interventions today is that historically and what you saw on TV was this like surprise factor. Like, let's trick your loved one into coming to a place where they're not going to be comfortable, where they're going to have their guard up, and where you're going to sit down and read them some letters. That's not how like 85% of them are done today. There are still some people who do it that way, but it's not the majority of it now.
And there are some circumstances where maybe that's your only option.
It's your only option.
Right? Yeah. And you do have to pull that card. It's, probably not the first choice.
It's not the first choice.
And you're an Arise interventionist, so you can talk a little bit about what that means too.
Yeah. So the Arise model is invitational intervention. And so that's looking more so at the family system as a whole instead of the individual as the problem, which I think as a person in recovery, like I can really identify with that because I mean, my family held an intervention on me. I'm in a like therapy session with, my father who is intoxicated, like, and I'm thinking that this is family intervention. And I'm like so excited to walk into this meeting to tell him like how bad he is and all this kind of stuff. And 10 minutes into it, he's like, "You're missing the elephant in the room." And I'm like, "Well, what's that, Dad?" And like knock, knock, knock. And like my mom, my grandparents, like my cousins, like all walk into this therapist's office. And I was like, "You tricked me." Like, and I didn't listen to a thing that they said. And so I think anytime someone can make a deliberate choice in themselves to say like, I want to go to treatment, that your odds of getting them to treatment increase. Like, you're not going to have this person who's just like saying yes so that they can then run away as soon as you let them out of the room. But B, you're setting them up for success in the long run. And then as an interventionist, like working to make sure that the family doesn't stop working when the loved one gets into treatment. That's the biggest value add, because holding these families accountable and like putting them in their own, like style of family treatment and getting them plugged in with resources as well. Like we know that when families are working on themselves and working through the systems issues that they have as a, this is a family disease, that as they work on themselves, the odds of successful recovery for the one that they've been worried about for so long increase as well. So
yeah, it's amazing. And so tell me a little bit, like kind of just fast tracking into your life now, you know, that's your business and obviously how you, and listen, I can relate to this as well. And I'm sure that you got into this field because, like myself, it was after getting sober and going through treatment, it was like, gosh, if I can do what, those guys did for me and make a career out of it, what an amazing way to make a living, right? And helping people and ultimately helping people save their lives. So what are you doing now for your recovery and your life? And what is life like now for you?
It's a dream. I think that I was lucky enough to celebrate 10 years, earlier this year and never thought that was possible. And B, I think that my recovery has shifted so much since the pandemic that I really didn't know what it was going to look like these days. And so when you took meetings away from me, which was a huge aspect of that social recovery that I grew to love and what I found out need, I had to create new ways to do that when we all went on lockdown. And so I find that today, the biggest thing that I do to support my recovery is wellness. That was something that I did not incorporate in my first 5 years. And so I think that just in and of itself, I make sure that I'm following a structure, I'm following a routine. I watch what I ingest and I try to stay on the healthier side of things. And B, it's staying in touch with the people that I'm close with. It's the connections that I have, not only in recovery, but in family and friends and all of that. And then it's making sure that I'm still suiting up and showing up to the place, into my 12-step meetings and raising my hand when people say that they need help and saying this is what I'm here to do. So this is how I did it. If you'd like to do it this way, we can.
Yeah, you gotta give it away.
Yeah, gotta give it away.
Yeah, and I think that it's that, and what I kind of heard there was balance, right, and finding a balance, and that's been a constant struggle for me in recovery, and obviously, starting a business is tough. We've been open for 6 months here, or a little over 6 months now here, New Waters, and finding that balance can be really, really tough sometimes. And so what are some of those tools that you have to really kind of get yourself back on track when you kind of find yourself going off?
I would say that my biggest tool is my calendar today. That's my biggest thing because I put things on my calendar that I want to do, things that I have to do, and things that I probably need to do. My therapy appointments go on there, and I know that I can't book anything around that. The gym goes on there, I know that I can't book anything around that. And then inevitably, it is just weholding myself accountable to the own goals that I'm setting for myself. And so sometimes that goal is make it to 4 meetings this week because you were only able to make it to 1 last week. Sometimes it's, we're going to spend this much time with family. We're going to spend this much time with friends. And I think that at the end of my week, I always I have 2 calendars. I have one for what I set out to do and one for what I actually did. So I measure the differences and, I think the balance comes out in that because when I find that, I took work calls from 6 to 10 one night when I was supposed to go to the gym and go have dinner with my friends, there's something there. And inevitably work wins. I'll tell you that work always wins as a business owner. It's impossible for it not to.
And the phone's ringing 7 days a week.
7 days a
right?
week.
And 24 hours a day.
24 hours a day. Yeah.
So, and we pick it up and people are always amazed when, or on Saturday night when we're on a phone call with a family at 9:30, like, I'm so sorry to keep you. And it's this is literally I'm doing this on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So,
and what's so crazy is that it's their worst day and it's it's our everyday, this is what we do.
Makes me happy to be able to help somebody. Even it is my job, but I still love doing it.
Yeah, definitely.
But I love what you said about the calendar. I just recently realized I just wasn't, even the nights I had kind of scheduled to go to meetings the way our, schedules work, that I just wasn't going to as many. So every Tuesday, I'm still going to go to some at night, but I have one that since I put it on my calendar, I've been every time.
Yeah.
And I just have to do it,
right.
And if it's there, then I will respect the calendar. And, that first week I remember thinking well, this guy's coming in, but somebody else could handle it. So I just went, if nothing else, to set the precedent that I'm going to do this for myself.
Yeah.
And then I just listened to a podcast the other day. I ran into a guy I know from the 12-step rooms at the gym who told me I should listen to this podcast about burnout. And it was a similar conversation about the calendar being a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to hear that. And, we're talking about recovery and spirituality, and it's like my outlet calendar is my most valuable tool, but I hear you.
Right. We talk about like this pandemic of substance use, and like that's why, of course, we're seeing the numbers increase of treatment admissions, but I think that there's a pandemic inside of the providers and that's burnout. Like,
Yes.
100%.
I mean, how many times, like the turnover of like and all of that stuff. It's exactly right. So
It's hard, man, and with medical providers, with clinicians, especially, we actually next month are doing an episode on this podcast
Perfect.
on burnout. So everybody tune in next month for the burnout episode.
Dr. Burnout,
nice,
right?
nice
Dr.
little
burnout.
Dr.
Yep.
nice plug. Nice plug.
Yeah, like that. So so I totally agree with that, and that's like a constant battle for me, man. And for me, it's so much of it, and you added or touched on it with like the eating, the working out, like the holistic stuff that we're doing, whether it's like meditation or journaling, sleep. Sleep
plunge.
is the biggest, right? What did you
Yes,
say?
cold plunge.
Cold plunge,
Yeah.
yes. Hot, cold therapy, biohacking, all that stuff is great. And when I'm not doing it, there's a total difference in my day,
Right.
So I wish, or I try to do that every day in my world, but it's tough sometimes,
Yeah, of course.
What's your meditation practice?
My meditation practice is 5 minutes every morning with a cup of coffee. So I sit there, I do quiet for 5 minutes, and then I read. I've got the 24-hour book that I read
Love it.
every day. Yeah.
Love it.
You've been reading that for 10 years.
10
I
years.
still have my 24 hours a day
Yeah.
book that I got in treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. My father mailed me one.
Yeah.
My grandfather mailed me one the second time I went to treatment. My grandfather was in recovery as well.
Amazing.
Yeah. So we would all three go to meetings together, which was pretty
That's
special.
so cool.
Yeah.
I've
very
never
cool.
seen that. I've seen a few father-son, mother-daughter thing, but never three generations.
Three
in a
generations.
meeting.
Yeah.
That's really cool. It would be interesting to do your genogram too.
Oh, I've
and
done it.
see kind of like the patterns as they break down, and then your future generations now after you guys have all hopefully broken the cycle to some extent. you
Yeah,
know?
I think I did one a couple years ago and was looking at my family, and every like Waters in the family tree was actively in recovery. Wow. And so,
Really?
yeah, male, like only the men, like not on the women's side. Like
Wow,
it's just
that's
like
incredible.
the men. And I had a cousin who was in recovery, uncle who's in recovery. Like, I got my baby cousin called me like 3 months ago and was like, I think I might have a problem. And I was like, yeah,
Wow.
bud, look at your family tree, like,
Yeah, we knew it.
Yeah.
We knew it. It was coming. We knew it when you were 6.
yeah. So.
So, well, Isaac, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better, hearing about your work. Obviously, you're doing incredible work, and looking forward to collaborating with you on clients down the road. But as well, we will have all of Isaac's information on our website, findingnewwaters.com, as well. This will be broadcast on all podcast platforms. So please come and check us out for next week's episode as well. And thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having me,
Isaac.
guys.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Graham.